The Japanese gods. But can they be Goku though? That's what the comment section of this video is gonna be about, isn't it? No one's gonna listen to what I have to say on this one. People are just gonna click on this video and start furiously typing, actually they cannot be Goku because... Well, guess what? I personally do not care if they can be Goku or not, because I do not care about nerd stuff like power levels. Now, if you excuse me, I have power levels to talk about. So, how powerful are the Japanese gods? And no, seriously, but can they be Goku though? Well, let's find out. But before we start, you should know that I'm going to mispronounce names. If you are a weeb and that bothers you, you should check out now, alright? Now, for this video, I have decided to talk about the deities that I am pretty sure are most well known. If you consume Japanese media, namely anime, chances are you have probably heard these names before. But before we talk about each of them, let's talk about the powers all the Japanese gods have, just by virtue of being gods. The standard Japanese god package, if you will. So, all the Japanese gods can transmute matter. They can transform one thing into something else. They also have supernatural strength. Even the weakest among them can lift something that would require 500 humans to lift. Let me be clear, this is bare minimum. Some gods are stronger than others. The point here is that they all have supernatural strength. They also all have the ability to curse others. Presumably, they can curse you in any way they want. As an example, they can curse you with instant death. The curses of the Japanese gods are so powerful that they even work on each other. And lastly, there's this minor Japanese god called Hitoko Tonushi, and he has the power to make good or bad things happen to others. Whether this is fate or luck manipulation, that's up for debate, but since Hitoko Tonushi is such a minor deity, you could argue that any Japanese god more powerful than him should also be capable of doing this, meaning that every single god I'm gonna talk about in this video would have either luck or fate manipulation. But you could also easily argue that this power is exclusive to Hitoko Tonushi. That would be up to you, I guess. Alright, now let's get specific. First, let's talk about Izanagi. Izanagi is one of the two gods that created the world, and he is strong enough to effortlessly lift a rock that would require 1,000 men to move. He can also clear a bunch of mist that was covering the entire planet just with his breath alone, and he seems to have the ability to make other gods just by doing random things. Among all the gods he has made, he made Amaterasu, goddess of the sun. Amaterasu, bare minimum, could be considered as literally being the sun, so Izanagi is easily star level, but he is likely higher since he can order all of his children around, including Amaterasu. He also has a Totsuka sword. A Totsuka sword is just any sword that is a certain length. Izanagi's Totsuka sword is called Ame no Ohabari, and it has another god living inside of it, which I guess it means Izanagi technically has a stand. But what matters is that with this sword, Izanagi killed the god Kagutsuchi, and that may or may not be impressive, but we will talk about it later. Lastly, Izanagi, along with his wife, were tasked with creating the world, and to do that, they were given a spear called Ame no Nuhoko. Moving on, next one would be Izanagi's wife, Izanami. Izanami's section is gonna be significantly shorter, but nevertheless impressive. She creates beings that not even her husband can defeat. That's it. Short, I know, but very impressive. Next would be Amaterasu. As mentioned before, Amaterasu is the goddess of the sun, so bare minimum, star level. But she must be more powerful than this, because it is said that her light illuminates the entire universe. She's also said to be superior to her brothers Susanoo and Tsukuyomi, so in theory, anything they can do, Amaterasu can do better. She should also be immune to fire, because in Japanese mythology, proof that you descend from Amaterasu is that fire doesn't hurt you, so this should apply to her as well. As for equipment, she has a bow, unfortunately no information is given about it, and she is the owner of the legendary sword Kusanagi. The Kusanagi is a sword that can manipulate the wind. When you unsheath it, the sword is said to emit a flash of light like lightning, and wherever the sword is, there is always a big cumulus of clouds above it. As for how powerful the sword is, once, with a single swing, the Kusanagi cut all the grass in an area called Sagami Province. Now, obviously, I am not Japanese, but according to Wikipedia, Sagami Province is what today is known as Kanagawa Prefecture. The Kusanagi cut all the grass in this area with a single swing. Moving on, next one is Susanoo, one of the brothers of Amaterasu. Originally, Susanoo was given authority over the sea. Potentially this could mean he has water powers, and possibly he may have fire powers as well, but this is very debatable. Also, he killed the goddess Ohogetsuhime, and under a literal sense, this goddess would be a literal island. He also killed the dragon Orochi, and Orochi is said to be as big as 8 mountains and 8 valleys. In addition, when Susanoo cries, he affects the entire planet planet, and when he flew from Earth to heaven to go visit his sister, he shook not just the planet, but the entire universe. As for his equipment, Susanoo has a bow called Ikuyumiya, no info about it unfortunately, and he has 3 Totsuka swords. One of the swords is called Ikutachi. It is so powerful that it can easily kill 8 Japanese gods. Moving on, next deity is Tsukuyomi, brother of Amaterasu and Susanoo. Tsukuyomi is the god of the moon, and it is said his light reaches the entire universe. He has also shown to be capable of easily killing lesser gods, and he is the guardian of the elixir of eternal life. If you were to drink this, you'd become young and live forever. Now, does that mean Tsukuyomi himself is immortal? I wouldn't go that far. It's very clear to me that the Japanese gods can die. Moving on, next one would be Kagutsuchi. This is another of the children of Izanami and Izanagi. He is a fire god, and his flames are so hot that as he was being born, he burned and killed his mother Izanami. Izanagi is utterly heartbroken, and so, in anger, he murders his own son. And then, from Kagutsuchi's blood, something is formed. See, Kagutsuchi is very hot. His blood is hot too, and so when his blood falls on the ground, the rocks transform into flaming rocks. Thus, volcanoes are born. However, there is another way to look at this. Kagutsuchi's blood is said to have transformed into the rocks of heaven. If by heaven we assume the text is talking about the night sky, these rocks would be stars, meaning that Kagutsuchi's blood transformed into all the stars in the Milky Way. This would put Kagutsuchi at bare minimum galaxy level. But again, this all depends on how you interpret Kagutsuchi's death. Next deity is Takemikazuchi. He is one of the gods that was born from the blood of Kagutsuchi, and if you consider Kagutsuchi's blood to be capable of making stars, Takemikazuchi perhaps could be considered star level. Scaling aside, Takemikazuchi once broke the arm of a deity called Takeminakata, and Takeminakata was so strong he could easily lift a rock that would require 1000 men to lift. Also, part of Takemikazuchi's name, the word Mikazuchi, implies an electric nature, so you could argue he has electric powers, but in the few stories where he appears, he has never used electricity. What Takemikazuchi does have, however, is a ridiculously powerful sword called the Futsunomitama. Now, have you ever seen that trope where a character is so amazing at using a sword that they can cut their targets a gazillion times in the blink of an eye? Well, the Futsunomitama can do that, except that it does it without you ever needing to unsheath the sword. You just grab it, and the people you are going to cut instantly get shredded, meaning that the Futsunomitama can cut you in the future. And with that, we get to the final deity we're gonna cover in this video, Ame no Minakanushi, the very first god to exist in Japanese mythology. Unfortunately, he literally does nothing, so we have no idea how powerful he could be. However, if, and this is a big if we assume that in Japanese mythology, the older a god is, the more powerful they are, then Ame no Minakanushi, being the very first one, would be more powerful than every other deity I talked about in this video combined. But you know, big if. Anyways, I think that's gonna do it. So, let's answer the question. How powerful are the Japanese gods? Well, for the deities I talk about in this video, I feel like planetary is a no-brainer. And in fact, I feel like there's enough evidence to argue that these gods have universal levels of power. Also, keep in mind that Buddhism is a big part of Japanese religion, but I did not use any Buddhist text for this video. If you were to inject Buddhism into these gods, they would be more powerful. So, in conclusion, the Japanese gods are big strong. That being said, I have nothing else to add, so thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.